I think I've only got 3 more cups. Hold on. Mr. Clay and, no, I'm fine. 1 second. Sounds great.
I would love to try your tea.
Please let me know what you think.
It is delicious.
Only grows here. We've been tending this garden for generations.
You're drinking dead people tea?
Aren't we all?
Yeah, that's very true. But you're like cultivating dead people for good tea.
Aren't we all? Please let me know, what can I do for you? Usually when people come here, it is because of some great tragedy. How may I alleviate your pain?
Oh, well, Herr Clay, we come to you with a great tragedy.
We recently lost one of our friends. And we
come here usually have.
We aren't here to bury him. He's already in the ground. But we've come to avenge him, and we were hoping to find some help.
This is a place where we take the dearly departed people who have done well and people who have lived good lives, and we put them into earth that has been touched by the Wild Mother, and in turn she grants them with beauty and splendor and sometimes tea. Honestly, I don't think I've really had enough experience to have an opinion on that. I'm a good gardener.
What do you grow other than dead tea?
I grow lilies, I grow Somewhere there's a plant that needs some compost, and I'm happy to make some more. Make people happy. I'm ready to leave. It's gonna be a little much, but I think I can do it. I'm ready. Everything's telling me that I should stick around and see where you're headed. I think that's where I'm supposed to be. This is pretty good from a certain perspective. I mean, you think about it, bad things happen to people every day, and then you have a bunch of people who care about you so much that they come and save you, fix it, defeat a great evil. I mean, nothing this good ever happens. This is great.
Good morning. How we doing, stream? Morning, Cameron. Morning, Lady Temeraire. Is that what does it? Why is that? That's so weird. All right. Diving into Weremage Chapter 5. Excuse me.
Chapter 5. As they ate with Jem the next morning, Lauren could sense Chet's concern for her. It fairly radiated from him, like heat from a flame. When she tried to reach for more food, he would offer to fetch it for her, and he kept asking her if she would like any more water to drink. She avoided his gaze all the while, and spoke lightly of small matters, but his worry remained, until a thought seemed to strike him, and he cocked his head. "Where is Zane?" he said. Lauren glanced towards the wizard's room. "Sleeping, I imagine. Normally he rises earlier than any of us," said Chet. Lauren and Jem gave each other a dark look. That had not always been Zane's way, and had only begun after his battles with Magestone sickness. Sometimes Lauren wondered if the wizard slept at all anymore, but now her thoughts were drawn to the night. The wizard slept at all anymore, but now her thoughts were drawn to the night before, and her dream. A chill went through her. She had recently consumed Magestones, once in Dorsey when the elves had forced her to do it, and then once again here upon the seat when she sought an agent of the Shades. The fact that she had them, and had eaten them, was unknown to anyone but Chet, and even he only knew of the first time. Could the Magestones be linked to her nightmare? She could only find out by asking Zane, and that was not something she could do carelessly. If the wizard found out she possessed Magestones, indeed if anyone other than Chet learned of it, her very life might be in danger, for it was a dark crime under the king's law. She shook off such thoughts and rose, going to Zane's room. Cautiously she tapped on the door, and when she heard no reply within, she pushed it open. Zane's bed was empty, the covers tousled, and his clothing from yesterday lay upon the floor. "Gone," she said, shrugging. "Off on some business as the new dean, no doubt." But she proved to be wrong, for Zane returned to them before they had finished eating. He stepped through the door wearing something that looked utterly foreign upon him, a full and beaming smile. "What under the sky are you grinning about?" said Lauren. "I have a surprise for you," said Zane. Or rather, the Lord Prince has arranged it, and he has allowed me to present it. Come with me." Lauren glanced at Chet, but he only shrugged. They rose, along with Jem, and followed Zane out into the hallway. The wizard led them to a part of the palace they had rarely visited, where many of the High King's guards were stationed, as well as a great number of mystics. Soldiers watched them pass with great interest. Lauren's cheeks flushed as she realized that many of them were looking at her. She fought the urge to raise her hood and instead held her head high. As the Nightblade, she would have to grow used to this, she supposed. Zane stopped at a heavy door, pausing before he opened it to ensure they were gathered behind him. He pushed it open to reveal a sort of barracks with beds along the walls, each with a small chest at the foot. In the center of the room was a long wooden table, and around it sat several mystics, their red hoods cast back from their faces. Lauren stood in the doorway, wondering why Zane would bring her here. Then the mystics looked up at her and stood from their places at the table. A smile broke out on her face, wide enough to match Zane's, and she laughed. "Weeth! Jormund!" she cried. The mystics came forward to embrace her, laughing, even large Jormund, who had hardly ever said a word to her. They had met her in Brecker when Lauren was fleeing east across Underrealm, and Cal had sent them to the seat to help deliver his message to the High King. Now they clapped her on the back and shook Chet's hand, and Jormund even picked up little Jem, who squealed like a pup. But as she released Weeth's wrist, Lauren looked past her to the other mystics at the table. They studied her with interest, but they had not risen, and she did not recognize their faces. "Where are Eric and Gwyneth?" said Lauren. The room fell silent. Jormund looked at her solemnly, and Weeth cast her gaze to the floor. Lauren's breath caught in her throat. "In the battle?" "On the eastern docks," said Weeth quietly. "We pursued the armies of Dulmoon there, and pressed the assault as they tried to board their ships and escape. Eric fought like a madman and killed 3 of them on his own, but an archer, darkness take them, fired from the stern of a ship as it fled, and the arrow pierced his heart. Gwyneth fell later, as we tried to clear the shades from the palace." Lauren bowed her head, blinking hard. "I wish I had been there." Weeth put her hand on Lauren's shoulder. "Do not be sorry. From what we have heard, you were more sorely needed in the palace, and the 9 kingdoms are grateful for your actions." She forced a smile. The other mystics stood from the table, 3 of them, and none looked alike. One by one they came forwards to be introduced. First was a short, slim woman of middle years, whose narrow eyes were quick and unsmiling. She was called Shun. There was a tall, broad youth named Uzo, whose shaved head was darker even than Anis's. He squeezed Lauren's wrist harder than he needed to, and she fought away a grimace as she tried to do the same. He smiled at that and clapped her shoulder. Jem gaped at Uzo, his mouth hanging open, and did not seem to hear when the young man offered him a hand to clasp. The last mystic was called Naya.
Kill Bill Sirens.
Though she was only a finger or 2 taller than Lauren, she was far more heavily muscled, so that Lauren felt minuscule in her presence. Beneath a shirt of chain, she had a leather jerkin with a high collar that covered her neck, but its sleeves were short, so that her thick arms were on display. She wore a secretive smirk as she approached Lauren and held forth her hand. When their wrists clasped, her skin was smooth and warm, and the hairs on the back of Lauren's neck tingled. "The Nightblade," said Naya. "I suppose this is meant to be an honor. The High King holds you in high esteem. That is impressive indeed for such a young woman." Lauren's cheeks flushed. "Not so young," she said. "Not too young, I suppose," said Naya. "Naya has been appointed the captain of our squadron," said Weeth. "She fought beside the former Lord Chancellor at the Eastern Gate and took a wound in the battle." "It sounds as if you are a hero," said Lauren. "Mayhap," said Naya. "It was only a small cut, and it was not the High King who raised my station for it, unlike you." Lauren realized that they had not released each other's wrists. She did so at last, though her hand seemed reluctant to obey. "There is time yet." Chet eyed the woman as they shook hands. I did not...
So the subtler the Weremage, I went over this a little bit in the Weremage addendum for Tales of the Wanderer, but the subtler the Weremage magic, the harder it is to detect, and the more skilled the Weremage, the more they can work to conceal the magic. And this is Auntie's thing. Like, she never actually developed the ability to turn into like any animals, which is why you never see her do that. She was strictly and only a spy, and she honed that hyper specialized skill to such a degree that she could slip by. Like, if somebody if one of the High King's personal like inspectors were to like put hands on her and search, they would be able to find it. But for just sort of like passing in the halls and stuff like that, nothing. And she never took the form of somebody who, like, she never tried to take the form of somebody like the Lord Prince or somebody like that who would be under constant scrutiny. She was just sort of, you know, what do you call it? She always took people who were sort of lower level, grunt, boots on the ground type people.
I did not see you in the fighting, he remarked. The smile she had worn for Lauren vanished, and Naya raised her eyebrows. And did you take count of every mystic before the gate? You have a cool head for battle, it seems. Oh, what is your position, by the by? Other than bedfellow of the Nightblade, I mean. His jaw clenching, Chet opened his mouth to reply, but Lauren barked a laugh despite herself. He turned his glare on her and held his tongue. Oh, come, Chet, she chided him. Do not be so serious. It was a joke. Naya grinned at Lauren, and Chet forced a smile as well. Well met, then, he said. Indeed, said Naya, and returned to her table. Jem stood there looking crestfallen, his hand still outstretched to clasp hers, but she acted as though he was not there.
Kill Bill sirens.
The other mystics told Lauren something of themselves. Uzo was a spearman, though he was quick to explain his spear was likely not similar to the ones Lauren was used to. It was short and flexible, and he used it half as a staff. Shion was a scout and skilled with a bow, but when she heard that Lauren had been learning the Kalentin style of shooting, her brows lifted, and she extracted a promise that the two of them would trade advice the next time they were in the training yard. After a time, Zane put his hand on Lauren's shoulder and gave her a smile. I am glad to see you reunited, he said, but that is not the end of the news I have for you. I did not bring you to see your friends only so that you could have a happy reunion. Ammon is in need of reinforcements, and these 5 will come with you on the journey there. Lauren's eyes shot wide, and she looked at the mystics anew. Her expression must have shown her shock, for Weath smiled, and Jormund released his huge, booming laugh. Shion and Uzo gave her a polite smile, but Lauren looked past them, to the table where Naya sat. The mystic woman had not taken her eyes from Lauren, and for a moment they locked gazes. Lauren's stomach did a pleasant turn, and she swallowed hard before turning away. Her gaze met Zane's, who still smiled at her in delight of his surprise. A grin stole across her face to match his, but then she realized that this was his parting gift, a replacement, though a shoddy one, for his own company upon the road. That thought seemed to throw a dark cloud over her joy, and her smile faltered. Zane saw it, and his own smile grew sad in response. There is time yet before that bitter parting, he said quietly, and I mean to fill it with happiness where I can. Tonight you must let me take you out upon the seat. We will eat and drink our fill, and pretend for a little while longer that no darkness waits beyond an ever-nearing dawn. Chapter 6. Chapter 6. Lauren returned to her quarters, along with Chet and Jem, and there Zane left them for the rest of the day. But he returned at dusk, bringing them fine clothes to wear. He handed the boys their outfits, but when he came to Lauren, he paused. "I did not know which you would rather wear," he said. "I have brought you trousers of dyed black leather to wear with a blouse and a vest, if you wish it. That is the sort of clothing I have always seen you in. But I also have here a dress. I am not sure if it is quite your size, and I had the clothier choose the cut. I am no expert in these things, you understand, and—" "Oh, sky above, Zane," she said, laughing at his sudden awkwardness. "Oh, sky above, Zane. Oh, sky above."
Hello?
And, "Oh, sky above, Zane," she said, laughing at his sudden awkwardness. "Let me look at the thing." Zane lifted it from his arm. Lauren went still at the sight of it, her breath escaping in a soft sigh. Hesitantly she reached out and took it, marveling at the feeling of the cloth between her fingertips. It was as blue as the ocean and worked through with thin threads of sea green in delicate patterns like tree leaves. She had never seen a fabric that shimmered just so, reflecting the torchlight when she turned it over in her hands. Its sleeves ran all the way to the wrists, where they closed with small buttons of some cream-colored stone she had never seen before. "It is a silly thing, I know," he said at once, looking embarrassed as he pursed his lips at it. "Most likely you do not—" "I do not often wear dresses," said Lauren. "The last one I owned was made by my mother, and she intended for me to wear it to a dance the very night you and I met." She pressed the dress to herself, smiling softly at him. "I ground dirt into that dress with my heel and spat upon it, for I hated her. But this one I will keep. It is beautiful." Then she frowned. "Though I hope you do not expect me to wear it often. I could not possibly mount a horse in this thing." He laughed and ran a hand through his hair. "Of course not. And you will find little occasion for dresses in Ammon, I assure you. But I am glad you like it, regardless." When Chet saw her in the dress, he could not stop staring, and in the end she had to force him to continue getting dressed himself. Once they were ready, and Lauren had donned her black cloak, Zane led them out of the palace and into the streets of the city, heading southwest. Lamps burned from the corners of many buildings along the way, lending the city a cheery look despite the cut of the frigid air. The island was full of people about their business, and if there were more soldiers among the crowd than there had been a few weeks ago, still the mood was cheerful and boisterous, with much laughter and songs that poured from nearly every tavern they passed. The rebuilding of the seat had raised the mood of all upon it, and there was a sense in those who dwelt there that the war, if indeed it ever came, would be a short and simple affair, and no source of great trouble or worry. Zane stopped before a tavern, and over its door Lauren saw a stag painted in silver. Inside, a fire burned in the wide hearth, and the lamps along the walls strengthened its warm glow. Zane introduced them briefly to the matron, Kanda, and she showed them to a table where they found well-cushioned chairs with intricate designs carved into the wood. When the food came, they found that it tasted nearly as delightful as the place looked. Seldom had Lauren tasted any meat so finely spiced, even in the palace, and there were sweet roasted fruits the likes of which she had never seen before. The wine, too, was uncommonly good, and she wondered how much Zane had paid for it all. When she asked him, he shushed her with a wave of his hand. "Tonight we are not concerned with such things," he said. "Tonight we think only of having one last happy memory together, at least until the next time we meet." "Speaking of meetings," said Jem, who had snuck himself a cup of wine when Lauren was not looking, "I have had a thought recently. How in all the skeins of time did the two of you meet each other? I have never heard the tale." Lauren blinked. She had told Chet the story, of course, but then they had spent far more time together since their reunion in Northwood. But she had never thought to tell Jem, for their journey together had consisted of one flight from danger after another. So she settled back in her chair and told the story now, of how she had caught Zane running through the birchwood and had begged him to take her with him. She skipped briefly over the description of her father and the reasons she wished to flee, and Jem did not press her for more details. But when she reached the part of the tale where they slept that first night on the riverbank, she scowled at Zane in mock fury and brandished her wine cup at him. "And then this buffoon, darkness take him, abandoned me on the riverbank." Zane's cheeks burned red, and he had to force a smile. "I did, though in my defense, I thought it would be safer for you." "Oh, yes, very safe," said Lauren, leaning over to Jem and muttering conspiratorially. "It only landed the constables hot on my heels, and then dropped me in the lap of Damaris of the family Yeren, who, you will remember, has tried to kill me more than once." The wizard barked a laugh. "And do you think I planned for that?" They argued over that for a bit, and then Lauren went on with the story, and by the time she had come to the part where Jem entered into it, the boy was so tired that he had nearly fallen asleep in his food. He perked up at the mention of his own name, but almost immediately his head began to sag again. Lauren looked towards the door, wondering what time it was. The common room was not so full as it had been when they entered, but the common room. The common room was not. The common room was not so full as it had been when they entered, but there were more than enough patrons to keep it open for some hours more. Her heart sank at the thought of ending their night so soon, and she looked reluctantly at Zane. He gave her a sad smile. Then Chet stood from his chair. "It grows late, and our urchin is almost asleep where he sits. I will see him safely to the palace and leave you two be." Lauren blinked at him. "You do not need to do that. I can come with you." "Stay," said Chet, smiling and putting a hand on her shoulder. "You and I have all the coming journey together, and many days after that as well. But your time with Zane is nowhere near so plentiful, and should be savored. And besides, it would be a crime if you did not spend as much time in that dress as you possibly can, for I do not know when you shall get to wear it again." Her sight grew misty, and she wondered if she had had too much wine. "Thank you," she murmured. Chet smiled and forced a grumbling Jem to his feet, and then walked the boy out into the night. "He is worth more than his weight in gold, that one," said Zane quietly. "Do not forget it." "I will not," said Lauren. "All our lives he has cared for me, and some time ago that care grew into a love unlike any I have seen before. I only worry that it is too much, for if his feelings for me ever caused him harm, I could not bear it." Zane cocked his head. "You speak as though you regret his feelings for you." Lauren shook her head quickly. No, of course not. How could I when I love him? No, of course. Of course. No, of course not. How could I when I love him as well? Only sometimes I think he sees me as more than I am. Mayhap, said Zane, or mayhap you see yourself as less than you are. She did not know what to say to that, and so they sat for a while in comfortable silence. Lauren finished her cup of wine, and Zane refilled it with the rest of the bottle. They sipped gingerly, and Lauren could sense the same hesitance in the wizard that she herself felt. A reluctance to move on, to see this night end and the next step in their journey begin. It was Zane who broke the silence. Lauren, I must ask you something. Do you still carry your dagger? She tensed. Yes. You mean to bring it with you? He said, studying her. I do. What else would I do with it? His eyes grew far away, staring over her shoulder. I do not know. Once you asked me if you should throw it into the Great Bay. Mayhap you should do that now. I fear what might happen if Cal should learn that you have it. Jordell was worried enough about it, and he was a much more forgiving man. I wish I were going with you. Lauren frowned. Cal was Jordell's master, and Jordell was the one who told me the truth of the blade in the first place. I had hoped to tell Cal of it and seek his counsel. Zane leaned forwards and shook his head, speaking in a low voice. I do not think that would be wise. He seemed a man more prone to pragmatism than to kindness. Jordell did not press you to rid yourself of the dagger because he trusted you. Though we met him only briefly, I do not know that Cal trusts anyone. If indeed you keep the dagger in your possession, you should not tell him of it. She pursed her lips. Very well, I shall keep it a secret. Promise me. Lauren rolled her eyes. I promise you. He smiled. You are too confident in yourself by half, but it is one of your endearing qualities. I hope you will send my regards to Annis, by the by, as well as my apologies. That girl will never have much affection for me, I fear. Who would? Said Lauren, raising her brows and drinking deep of her wine. Careful now, said Zane, scowling with mock severity. Have you not heard I am a mighty fire mage? I might catch you in my flame. Lauren chuckled. It is good to see you happy, Zane. You have not had much occasion for joy since I have known you. And when Jordell... She took a moment to swallow past a lump in her throat. When Jordell told me how you used to be, before you fled the seat, I could scarcely believe it. Now I see that he did not tell me even half of the truth. Zane's eyes sparked with interest. I never knew that. What did he tell you? Do you wish to hear tales of your praise? She teased. He said that you were mayhap too quick to anger, but you were quick to laugh as well. He said that was how you earned yourself favor among the great, especially the Lord Prince. When I met Eamon, I could not understand why he would befriend such a dour man as yourself. But I have since seen a new part of you, and I am glad. If this is how you were before you left the sea, then I would not take you away from it for all the gold in the 9 kingdoms. The wizard's eyes shone with tears for a moment. He cleared his throat and then slapped the table abruptly. Come, I wish to show you something. Lauren straightened. What? Where? It is the middle of the night. All the better, said Zane. Come. She hesitated a moment more, but Zane had already stood and was making for the bar. There he spoke briefly to Kanda, and, after he placed a pair of coins in her palm, she handed him 2 more bottles of wine. One of these he placed in Lauren's hand, before drawing her through the room and out into the street.
Excuse me. Oh, all right.
Chapter 7. The night was no longer young, and the first snow had begun to fall earlier that day. Not enough to cause drifts in the streets, but enough that Lauren drew her cloak tighter and blew into the side of her hood to warm her face. Zane led her west in the moonlight, and before long they approached a huge black building surrounded by a wall 10 paces high, all in black granite with silver trimmings. Lauren stopped short. "The Academy," she said, a shiver running up her back. "Zane, where are we going?" "Inside, of course," he said. "Did you not know that I am the dean?" He threw open the front door and strode in. Lauren hastened to follow, looking nervously around. The front hall was wide, with 2 staircases leading up from it in different directions, as well as halls leading to endless rows of doors in all directions. Moonlight poured through the windows high above, though it weakened considerably before it reached the floor, and most of the illumination came from a chandelier high above. She jumped as the doors slammed shut behind her, and turned to see that an old woman had closed them. The woman was short and wizened and had a mad look in her eye, but she ignored Lauren entirely as she returned to her post by the door. "Come," said Zane, making for a hallway off to the left. Lauren followed, not daring to trail too far behind. She knew that anyone they met would likely be a wizard. It was a curious thought, for everywhere else in the Nine Kingdoms, wizards were a rare thing. She need not have worried, for they did not see anyone until Zane stopped before another thick door, this one made of oak. Next to the door was a chair, and in the chair was a shriveled crone who could have been the sister of the woman at the front door. This woman's back was not so hunched, and her fingers not so gnarled, but her eyes held a mean and cruel sneer.
"What do you want?"
she grated. Her nose turned up as she observed the bottle of wine Lauren carried. "I believe you meant to ask, how may I help you, Dean Foradar?" said Zane. "And my answer, Carog, is that you may stand aside."
"Certainly,"
said Carog, giving him a nasty smile. She hobbled out of the way. Zane stepped forwards and put his hand on the latch, but it did not budge. His shoulders heaved with a sigh, and he turned. "Open the door, Carog." Carog's eyes shot wide with mock innocence.
"Oh, dearie me, is it locked? Now, where would I have placed the key? It gets so hard to remember these things at my age."
She made a great show of fumbling at the pockets of her robes. Zane glared at her. "If you have lost the key, then I have no choice but to declare you derelict in your duties and replace you. I am certain Melly will recommend a suitable steward in your stead." In an instant, Carog's face turned to a bitter grimace. Angrily, she thrust a hand into her robes and with...
Hey, baby. Say hi to stream.
Hi, stream.
Oh, keep doing that. What's up?
I love you.
I love you too.
Oh my god, he's looking hot.
Who is? What? Oh, right.
If you guys want to know who I find attractive, it is this young man. Right here.
Erica said hi.
Hi, Erica. Always good to hear from you. What are you doing later?
Hate that. Hate that.
I love you.
Love you. Just spent the morning putting together a gorilla cart for my wife. I don't even know what a gorilla cart is.
What is a gorilla cart?
I don't know, but I gotta get back to this chapter.
Okay.
Trunking through Weremage.
It's a garart.
Get the fuck out.
Yeah.
Get the fuck out of my office.
It's a garart.
Angrily, she thrust a hand into her robe.
Garart.
Garart.
Jurassic Parrot.
Angrily, she thrust a hand into her robes and withdrew a key, which she hastened to turn in the lock. "Thank you, Carog," said Zane graciously, as he led Lauren within. After the door slammed shut behind them, he smirked. "She has hated me ever..." After the door slammed... After the door slammed shut behind them, he smirked. "She has hated me ever since I was a student. I would sneak in here often without her knowing. She only caught me twice, but she never forgave me." "She is horrid," said Lauren, "and age has not improved her. But I am the dean, and no longer need to care about such things. Come, and let me show you one of my favorite places." Looking up, Lauren saw that they were in a great circular tower, and then she realized that it was the Academy's bell tower. A wide staircase ran along the wall, built into the stone itself, and there high above them was the bell, massive even from this far down. Zane started up the steps, and she followed behind. His pace soon slowed, and she heard him pant heavily. But Lauren had lost none of her hardiness from a lifetime in the forest, and she chuckled as she outpaced him. "You were as slow as the day we met, wizard," she said. "Now that you are a man of books and learning, Do not forget to leave your desk every once in a while, or I shall find you fat and lazy when I return to the seat. Some would be glad to grow fat and happy in their later years, gasped Zane, but he quickened his pace to keep up with her. They reached the top, and Lauren marveled at the sight of it. The bell was surrounded by a wide platform, and at the edge of it was a rail. Beyond that was only open air, so that in all directions she could look out and see the city laid before her like a blanket, but shining with the light of torches and hearths. The wind was stronger here than it had been on the street, but Lauren hardly noticed it, so taken back was she at the sight before her. "Zane," she breathed, This is... "It is it not?" he said, his smile widening. He guided her to the edge, and there he sat, draping his arms over the railing. Lauren did the same beside him, laying her cloak beneath her so she did not dirty her dress. From within his coat, Zane pulled his bottle of wine and removed the rag that sealed it. Lauren took that as a signal, and she opened her bottle as well. "To the High King Annalyn," said Zane. "Long may she reign, and her enemies be vanquished." "To lengthy roads traveled together," said Lauren. "May our memories of them never dim." They clinked the necks of the bottles against one another and drank deep. For a while after that, Lauren was content to enjoy the sights and smells of the city far below, and track the slow progress of the moons across the sky as they blotted out one star after another. The wine was the finest they had had so far that night, and half of hers was gone before she realized it. The edges of her vision had and half of hers was gone before she realized. Was the finest they had. Real.
There you are. I think. Yeah.
She realized it. The edges of her vision had begun to grow blurry. She held up the bottle. "How much gold have you spent on me tonight, Zane?" Zane held up his own wine. "On us, you mean? Do you think I would spend a small fortune just to please you?" She snorted. "I should say not. I have given you no end of reasons to be annoyed with me during our time together. And I have, in turn, made your life horrible upon occasion," said Zane quietly. He drank again from his bottle. Lauren shook her head. "Even at its worst, I would not call it horrible. Frightening, yes, and sometimes painful, but horrible was the birchwood and my father. Whatever else you have done, you took me away from that, and that would be cause enough for thanks. But I have learned, too, just how honorable you are at your core. That is, when you are not being a colossal idiot." Though she spoke in jest, Zane looked at her solemnly. "And you, Lauren of the family Nelda, how could I know, when first we met, the greatness in your own heart? Were you royalty, I do not doubt you would one day be the High King. Were you a merchant, your family would become the richest in the 9 lands. And as things stand, well, what commoner could claim to be greater than you?" He raised his bottle in another toast and then drank deep. "You are drunk," Lauren proclaimed, "and I mean to join you." She took another swig. "Join me? You are further along than I am." Lauren looked up at the moons, which were close to vanishing behind the roof of the bell tower. But that brought thoughts of sleep, which brought thoughts of dreams. Her good mood dampened. "Zane," she said carefully, "when you ate mage stones..." She felt him stiffen beside her. "I'm sorry. I should not have presumed to ask." "It is all right," he said. "Only that is a tale I would rather not spread through the academy. But none are near us to eavesdrop now. Go on." "Did you dream?" said Lauren. I remember when we carried you through the great rocks that you would lie there twitching and moaning at night. He arched an eyebrow at her. What has brought you to such a question? Lauren shrugged. I do not know. It worried me then. There were many things I wondered during those times that I have never had the courage to ask you until now. You seem well recovered, but how can that be when you suffered so terribly? Zane gave a grim chuckle. I did. But no, I did not dream, nor would I have. Mage stones have other properties beyond strengthening a wizard's power. They quell the appetite entirely, for one thing. Do you remember how Jordell almost had to force me to eat? And they purge the body of other influences. The remedies of the apothecary have little effect upon a wizard who eats mage stones, and the same is true for poisons. And as I said at the first, a wizard who consumes the stone does not dream. That is good, said Lauren absent-mindedly. Then she realized how that sounded and hurried to correct herself. I mean, it is a little sad, I suppose, but I am glad you do not have the nightmares I thought you did. Are you worried about last night? Said Zane, his brows drawing close. Lauren, what under the stars did you dream of? I told you I do not remember. She had made a mistake and drawn his thoughts far too close to her secret. I was only wondering if the sickness still troubled you at all. If you should fall back into darkness, I will no longer be here to box your ears and tie you up until you come to your senses. Pushing his shoulder, she flashed him a wide smile. He returned it, and her fear left her. You need not worry on that account. Those dark days are behind me and will never return. I can hardly believe that you and I once conspired to sell those thrice-cursed stones. Do you remember? Of course. It was not so long ago, said Lauren. Zane fixed her with a look. Now that I think of it, that is a piece of information that may yet prove useful. If you remember, I had a contact in Dorsey who I thought might buy the stones. You may have need of such a man. But I no longer wish to sell mage stones, said Lauren, studying him carefully.
Cameron, you're not wrong.
Of course not any longer. But there are other goods beyond the king's law, and if you do not wish to sell them or buy them, a spy should still know someone who deals in them. Oh, said Lauren. Very well then. Where might I find him? His name is Weil, and he lives in the city of Bertram. It is in Dorsey, west of the King's Road where it runs by the Great Rocks, halfway between their southern tip and the Moonslight Pass to the north. Very well, said Lauren. If I ever have occasion to visit him, I shall send him your regards. He will not take kindly to that, said...
Wife?
Is he?
What's up?
I just like looking at you.
Okay. Is it okay if I keep working?
Yeah. I should probably leave you alone. You're going to take the kids pretty soon.
Yep. I'm trying to get this done before.
Okay. I will let you go.
Loving you.
He will not take kindly to that, said Zane with a harsh laugh. You might do better to pretend you never knew me. But now we have spoken overmuch of such things. It is a fine night, too fine to spend it with talk of mage stones and other dark matters beyond the king's law. I feel as though there are few matters these days which are not dark. That is true enough. This morning I gave my first speech to the academy students. It was in the front hall, the one we passed through. They looked so young and so frightened, and it was my duty to convince them not to be afraid, and that I would protect them. But you will, said Lauren. Is that not part of your duty? It is, and I will not abandon it like that faithless steer, Cyrus, said Zane. But I am one man, a wizard and a strong one, I can say without boasting. Yet I do not know if I have it in me to keep them safe from all harm. To her own great surprise, Lauren squeezed his shoulder. I must be very wine-addled, she thought. No one has that power, but few could come closer to it than you. Your only fault is that you are so stupidly serious about everything. If you can only shed the idea that you bear all of the world's burdens, you will do much better." Zane laughed. "Wise words from one so young, and I think you may be right. Besides, now that my son is returned to me, I need not worry half so much. I do not jest. You are a great wizard, Zane, and may even be a great man." He lowered his gaze, looking down on the city again. "Jordell was a great man," he murmured. For the second time that night, Lauren swallowed past a tightness in her throat. "I thought you wished not to speak of dark matters. Even in death, Jordell is a light. That is what you must remember, Lauren. If you think me great, know that I hold you in even higher regard. But you are young, and the Nine Lands hold grief enough to fill the lives of all within them. No matter how dark your road may grow, you must remember Jordell. If you live by what he would do, you will rarely go far wrong." With another pang of guilt, she thought of the Mage Stones. "I will remember," she said softly. "I have entered the High King's service because of him, after all." Zane's eyes narrowed, as though that answer did not entirely satisfy him, but he gave no answer. Another thought struck Lauren. She took a deep breath. "Will we ever see each other again, you and I?" She thought Zane might answer easily with a casual reassurance. Instead, he shrugged. "Who can know? But I think we might. The answer lies more in your hands than mine. My duty will keep me on the seat for the foreseeable future, yet who knows what fortunes the coming war may bring. I think the war will be over quickly and easily if it is not entirely bloodless," said Lauren. "Already it has claimed its share of blood," said Zane, quiet and solemn. "And I fear it has only begun. We are among the few who know the true enemy. Not the kingdom of Dolmoon, but the Shade's master, the Necromancer." Lauren shivered at the name, but she thrust out her hand to him. "A promise, then, between you and me. If we survive this war, I will return, and you and I will sit here together again, and here we will stay until all the tales of our journeys have been told." Zane clasped her wrist in agreement, but Lauren seized his and dragged him closer, until his nose was almost touching hers, and she scowled. "And if you break your word to me this time, I will drag you to the top of this tower and throw you off of it. We will see if you can summon a storm to carry you safely to the ground." The wizard burst out laughing, the longest, loudest, and clearest she had ever heard from him, and it was as if in an instant he had cast off all the cares that troubled him, all the way back to before the moment they had met in the birchwood. She did not doubt that that laugh could be heard for a great distance in the city below. "You have my word, Nightblade. I will hold you to it, Dean Foradar." Her mouth twisted. "It sounds odd upon my tongue." "And mine," said Zane. "But now come. We have spent long enough up here already, and I grow cold. Besides, what would people think if they found the Dean drunk at the top of his own bell tower?" He stood and helped her up, and they stumbled down the stairs together. And for the first time in all their journey together, Lauren thought that she could call Zane her true friend.
I gotta go take the kids to the bus. I'm going to go do that, and I will be back in probably about 15 minutes. I will leave you with some music while I'm gone, and then we'll come back and keep chunking through the book. Back in a few.
I mean, really? I mean, people aren't good. That's not how this works. I mean, things that you do are good or bad, but people are just people. People come and they talk a lot.
When they're grieving.
Yeah, and you listen a lot. I don't know much, but I know people, and I know things that aren't people. There's a lot more, apparently, and,
You seem to pick up on the stuff that's not said.
I mean, you have to.
There, not yet removed from the cross, whether it be by luck or superstition, there is the white snow dappled, multicolored coat of mollywogged teeth.
May I? Something will be here.
What did you just do?
I made the earth remember him. Something will be here. Well, it's more than a thank you. I feel that you have to be free, so that you can finally pay your debt.
This is me paying my debt.
No, this is you hiding from your debt. You're a man who is afraid of what you owe. I understand. That's okay. This is not your debt. Your debt lies elsewhere. I know these things. I think perhaps it's destiny. Do you believe in destiny?
No, but
But you dream about islands and you go to them. path and you're with us now because of some divine intervention. I think it's important to follow one's feelings on such things. I commend you.
So maybe some supplies? Something to buff us up a bit?
Some bees.
Some bees? Yep. I think some bees would suit you.
I just really want to see them.
We can talk to them.
I really want to talk to them.
I've talked to many bees in my time.
Really?
Yeah.
You can teach me the language?
I mean, you just, hey bees.
Hello, bees. Please come over here and let me say hello. Hello, bees. You can talk to them. Yeah, say something.
What do you want me to say to them? I don't know.
Tell them to come over here, but don't sting us.
Hold on. Let me do a thing. I think I'm coming to the realization that perhaps I was not entirely clear of what I signed up for, but I don't think that means that it's the wrong path. I'm getting used to the idea that this is going to be a test if it were easy. To continue on with us. I joined your group of friends, I guess our group of friends now, as a testament of faith, and it would be a disservice to that faith to turn around because it's hard. If it had been easy and of good faith deserve to be rewarded when they can. I wanted to give you something that will make your time with us a little bit easier, I suppose. Mr. Caleb, do you believe in fate? I would like to think not. Shaping you into something important, and I want to make sure that you get to wherever you need to be. That's a pretty big matzo ball. Even when we're not the best of people, I feel like we're still moving towards something that's good and worthwhile. And I'm feeling the struggles in my way to bring us to where we need to be. Welcome to the 9. I'm honored. I serve nature, and I'm the maker of fine graves.
Okay, we're back. Oh, hi, Mark. You're my favorite customer. Thank you, Lady Temeraire. No, wait a minute. What? Why does chat keep doing this to me? Okay, and then if I go here... I don't know why my chat box refreshes. It's very annoying. Well, anyway. I'll slick back my hair, you know the damn. Oh. Ah. Whose voice did I bounce this time?
The answer to that is not entirely certain. Just now, the Nine Kingdoms are in a precarious position. The way that people perceive this...
Ennis! Oh, I missed you. Oh.
Chapter Chapter 8. One day more passed, a day that Lauren spent miserable after the wine from the night before. As the sun lowered in the sky, Zane came to sit with her in the common room between their chambers, and they discussed the road from the seat to Ammon. The wizard looked even the road from the seat to Ammon. The wizard looked even worse for wear than she did. When night came and supper passed, they did not remain awake for long. Lauren would have relished one more night spent together, but they would wake early the next day, and she would rather not be exhausted for the beginning of their voyage across the Great Bay. A palace servant roused them before
Big Pop.
A palace.
So when we go into this spectral view, right? You can see this big fucker right here. So this bottom row, this bottom bottom line is all your frequencies below 100. And when you have a big pop like that, it shows up and you just delete it.
A palace servant roused them before dawn, and Lauren and Chet dressed together in silence. They shook Jem awake twice, and still he did not rise from his bed. In the end, Lauren lost patience and threw a pitcher of water on him. Zane awakened too, and left with them so that he could say a final farewell before they set sail. In the palace courtyard were the mystics who would accompany them. 2 carriages took them all quickly to the western docks. It was the same place they had landed just weeks before, as fugitives and refugees. They had risen far since then. Now the dean of the academy was there to see them off, and to their delight, so was the Lord Prince. Eamon awaited them in the dim gray glow just before dawn, and stepped forwards with a smile as they clambered down from the carriage. Farewell, Chet of the family Lindell, and Jem of the family Noctis. Farewell, Nightblade. I would have a promise from you that the next time we see each other, you will tell me the tale of that time you met the elves, eh? Lauren bowed deep. I give you my word, your highness. Eamon's smile widened. Then he withdrew, and Zane took his place. He and Chet clasped wrists, with Chet regarding the wizard silently. I was not myself when first we met, said Zane. You have shown yourself to be nothing but an honorable man, yet in the course of our travels I have given you no great cause to love me. I wish you well on the roads ahead, and beg that you think of me better than I may deserve. Promise me that you will care for Lauren. That I will do, promise or no, said Chet. Farewell here upon the island, Zane. I may not love you, but you have proven yourself an honorable man as well, in the end. When Zane went to Jem, the boy put his hands on his hips and sniffed. Farewell, wizard. I suppose you have proven not to be such a poor traveling companion, though sometimes were better than others. Zane chuckled. I wish, my boy, that you were a wizard, for it would be my pleasure to oversee your instruction personally. As it is, my days will be emptier of laughter until we meet again. Jem seemed to enjoy the thought of being a wizard very much, for his eyes shone. All pretense of bravado fell from him, and he leaped forwards to give Zane an awkward hug around the waist, before scampering bashfully away and towards the ship. Only Lauren remained, and they looked at each other in silence. They had said all they needed to at the top of the Academy's bell tower. In the end, she seized him in a great bear hug, and he squeezed her back, though his arms were far weaker. "Farewell, Lauren," he said. "Remember Jordal. And you. Farewell."
We love just a hint of of ambiguity. When he says, "Remember Jordel," and she says, "and you," is she saying, "and you remember him as well?" Or is she saying, "and I will remember you in the same light"? That's up for you to decide. And either way, I'm sad.
"Remember Jordal. And you. Farewell." The captain set sail almost the moment they had boarded. Thus began their journey to Ammon, and a miserable journey it was. Winter had come at last to Underrealm, well and truly, and storms racked their vessel all the way to the southern coast of Feldamar. Lauren and Chet spent most of their time in their bunk, which could hardly have been less private, for it was only one bed of 8 in the same cabin. Jem was in the room with them for the larger part of the journey, curled miserably under his blanket. He had not been overly prone to seasickness in the past, but this voyage was unlike either they had taken together before. After 6 days of sailing, they docked at a town on Feldamar's southern shore, and there they rested overnight. Lauren noticed a curious tension in the town that she did not understand at first, but then she realized that they were perilously close to the kingdom of Dulmoon. But then she realized that they were perilously close to the kingdom of Dulmoon, the kingdom that had risen in treason against the High King. Though Dulmoon had taken no military action since their assault on the seat, most believed it was only a matter of time before the seafaring kingdom made war again, and coastal towns like this would likely be among their first targets. The day after they landed, Naya purchased horses for all of them, with a purse of coins that had been given to her upon the seat. They had brought no mounts with them, for moving steeds by boat was most difficult with the strength of winter's storms. Lauren was glad she had sent her horse, Midnight, to Ammon before her journey to the High King's seat. Their reunion was one more thing to look forward to when Lauren reached Jordel's home at last. Their road north through Feldamar was hardly any more cheery than the ocean voyage had been. The kingdom proved to be a wet and marshy land, where the air was muggy despite the cold of winter. It did not snow here, but that was little comfort, for it rained heavily and always. Often the roads would be flooded or covered by mudslides, causing long delays. Thus, a journey that should have taken them 4 days on horseback took 7 instead. When they camped for the night or stopped for a midday meal, there was little conversation beyond what was necessary to build camp. But Lauren did snatch some tidbits of information from the mystics they rode beside, particularly the new ones. She learned that Shiun was a woman of Dulmoon, an awkward fact considering that nation's treachery. But she had left that land when she was a young girl, and had spent the last many years in the southwestern reaches of Underrealm. Uzo hailed from Feldamar, and seemed the least uncomfortable with the heavy rains that pelted them. It was the way of winter in this land, he told them, and this was far gentler than the worst storms he had seen growing up. Jormund was a man of Calenton. That caught Lauren's attention. "Truly," she said, "but you are a swordsman. Why do you not use the bow?" "You know something of our archers, then," said Jormund, flashing his easy grin. "But a whole kingdom cannot stand back and fire upon their enemies from afar, for then they would be in grave trouble should those enemies ever get too close. And besides, I'm too large to be an archer. When they put a bow in my hands as a boy, it snapped to kindling when I drew it." He laughed. Jem's eyes went wide, but Lauren leaned close and said, "He is joking." She had meant to be quiet, but Jormund heard her. "I am not," he insisted. "Give me your own bow if you do not believe me, and I will show you." Lauren declined. Naya proved more reticent to speak of herself. When Lauren asked the land from which she hailed, she said only Wadeland, but she did not have the look of one from that kingdom, and she told them nothing of how she came to join the Mystics. Lauren thought at first to press her for the tale, but soon realized that this first to press her for the tale, but soon realized that this was neither the time nor the place. She herself did not enjoy speaking of her childhood in the Birchwood, particularly when it came to her parents. But that did not quell her curiosity about the mystic woman, a curiosity, she admitted to herself, that was stoked to greater heights by the intense, smoldering look she often saw in Naya's eye when the woman thought she was not looking. Mayhap, Lauren decided, she would be able to learn more once they reached Ammon. Jem tried often to get Uzo to drill with him, for the boy still practiced the sword stances Jordell had taught him in the Great Rocks many months ago. He was much better at the forms now, and his arms had begun to fill out with his constant practice. But Uzo seemed to regard Jem as little more than an annoyance, and only joined in his training with great reluctance. Over and over again he trounced the boy, but Jem always sprang up off the ground beaming. "You are a great warrior indeed," he said one evening, after Uzo had thrashed him thoroughly. Uzo raised an eyebrow. "Greater than a boy with almost no practice? Stay your praise, for my pride cannot bear to be stoked any more." Jem laughed as though that were a great joke. One by one, Lauren followed the landmarks that Zane had laid out for her on the route that would take them to Ammon. Sometimes they were easily found and lay beside wide roads that were well kept. Other times they led her off into unbroken land where there was nothing but thin goat trails to go by. But at last, after 7 days, they came upon a wide plateau with a hill atop it, in the middle of a flat grassland, and upon that plateau was the stronghold of Ammon. It was an impressive sight from the first, even when it was only a shape on the horizon that she could cover with her thumb. As they drew closer, they could see that it was built in 3 levels. First, a high wall that rimmed the edges of the plateau, from which there was only a single gate at the top of a ramp leading down. The middle wall, halfway up the hill, had 2 gates, and what looked like several structures built inside for the housing of troops. Finally, the keep itself sat upon the hill's crown. It looked large enough to house 1,000 troops in comfort. As they neared, the plateau seemed to grow larger and larger, and the stronghold with it, so that Lauren felt smaller the closer she drew it, so that Lauren felt smaller the closer she drew. Leagues away, they knew they had been spotted when they heard the clarion peal of horns signaling their approach. Soon after, they reached the bottom of the ramp and felt eyes upon them all the way up. But when they reached the top, the gate was still closed. There, on the wall just above them, was an old man with a long white beard, wrapped in the red cloak of a mystic. Lauren recognized him, of course, for they had met only weeks before. He was Cal of the family Endil, and he looked just as severe as the first time she had laid eyes upon him.
"Who approaches the stronghold of Ammon, home of the family Adair?"
said Cal.
"Lauren of the family Nelda, Nightblade of the High King,"
said Lauren.
"But you know that already, and it is raining, so be quick and open the gate."
Cal scowled, but he turned to the men in the gatehouse and gave a nod. The drawbridge began to lower as they bent to the wheel, spanning the gap between the top of the ramp and the portcullis leading into the first level of the fortress. "I would advise you to be more careful with your manners," muttered Weath beside her, though Lauren could see the wizard was hiding a smile. "I have known the Grand Chancellor for many years, and while he is not a stickler for ceremony, he sees great value in military decorum." "I see greater value in a warm bed, especially now," said Lauren. "I will not be kept huddling outside his fortress in the rain because I have not saluted to his liking." After the drawbridge slammed into place, they walked their horses across it. Cal had descended to the courtyard and waited within, backed by a household guard of mystic knights. Lauren dismounted before him and gave a curt bow, pulling her gloves from her hands. Pulling her gloves from her hands. "Well met, Cal of the family Endil." "And you, Nightblade. If you will follow me, there is much to—" But a high-pitched squeal cut him off, and from between Cal's mystics came a black and silver streak. It was Annis, in a dark dress that she had hitched up to run full tilt, and with a scream she flung herself into Lauren's arms. Lauren shouted in joy and hoisted her up in the air, and Jem launched himself from the saddle where he had been sitting behind Chet, tackling them both so that they all fell to the ground. He covered Annis's cheeks with kisses, and she laughed as she tried to hug him and Lauren at the same time. Tears poured down the girl's cheeks, and Lauren found it hard to keep her own restrained. "Sky above," barked Cal. "Are you servants of the High King or children in truth? Get up, for though you may have all day to roll about in the mud like pups, I do not."
Shut the fuck up, Cal, you piece of shit.
Lauren rolled her eyes, but she got up and pulled the children with her. But Annis and Jem did not let go of each other. "Very well," said Lauren. "We are weary after our journey. If you will show us to our quarters, we will take our rest, and you may go about your business." "Rest must wait," said Cal. "As I had begun to explain, you and I have much to discuss." Stepping aside, he waved her on with a wide sweep of his arm. Lauren sighed, hoping their discussion would be brief, for she was indeed weary and sick of the rain besides. But just as she stepped past Cal, she froze in her tracks. In the group of mystics who stood there was a man who looked to be from Wadeland. His hair was black and cropped close to the scalp, and a scar split his chin. He wore a red cloak now, but when last she had seen him, he had been dressed in the gray and blue of a shade, and he had stood behind Damaris in her dream. "Lauren?" said Chet behind her. "Is something the matter?" The man was looking at her oddly, and did she catch a trace of fear in his eye? Lauren tore her gaze away from him and looked to Chet. "No, nothing," she said. "Only I am tired, and my mind went far away. But I'm sure the Chancellor has no care for our weariness. Come, let us accompany him before he bursts with his impatience." Cal growled something inaudible, and Chet snickered as they followed him onwards. But Lauren stole a brief glance behind her. Mayhap she imagined it, but she thought she saw the man swallow with relief as she passed him by. She thought she saw the man swallow with relief as she passed him by. Relief as she passed. swallow with relief as she passed him by.
Oh, the sniffle is fucking killing me. Hate it so much. Gonna go blow my nose. I'll be right back. Ugh, boy.
Chapter 9. Cal took little notice of Lauren's hesitation and pressed quickly on until they had reached the keep atop the plateau. But Chet took her arm and drew her back a pace and leaned in to whisper. "What was it? You looked as though you had seen an elf." Lauren shook her head. I'm not certain. We should speak of it later." Inwardly, she was not even certain what she would tell him. She knew nothing of the man she had seen. They had never met so far as she could recall. All she knew was that he had been in her dream, dressed as a shade. Should she even try to do anything about it? A part of her wanted to believe it was a coincidence, but another part knew that was foolish. It was not exactly a common thing to see something in a dream only to see it later in the waking world. And then she thought of the rest of that dream, Damaris and Chet's death. and Jem's teeth on her throat. No, there was some explanation for this. There must be. Cal stopped short, and Lauren was so absorbed in thought that she nearly ran into him. He threw open a door in the hall and drew her into a small council room. 2 mystics took up positions of guard, one on either side of the door. Lauren was relieved to see that neither of them was the dark-haired stranger from her dream. But when the rest of Lauren's party started to follow them in, Cal waved his hands at them as if they were cats.
Off with you, all except Lauren. My men will see to your lodgings, such as they are. You knights will receive your assignment in time. The rest of you may sit on the ramparts until the rain has pierced you through, for all I care. Go!
They went, with Chet giving Lauren one last worried look before the door closed between them. But it was not until Lauren turned to Cal in the center of the room that she saw Annis had remained. Cal acted as though it were the most normal thing in the world. In fact, he hardly seemed to notice the girl. He had eyes only for Lauren, and he seized his long beard in his fingers as he narrowed his eyes at her.
You certainly took your time to get here,
he said. Lauren blinked.
I beg your pardon? I came here by the route that was given to me.
Aye, and weeks after the attack upon the seat,
said Cal.
When the High King ordered me.
Cal snorted.
If we all waited for orders, the 9 kingdoms would already have fallen to ruination. Everyone moves too slowly by half, and even the High King is no exception.
Unbidden, a flush of anger rose to Lauren's cheeks.
You should not speak ill of your liege lord.
Criticism should never be forbidden, least of all when it comes to kings, said Cal. If a few more had been brave enough to speak against the wizard kings in their day, how many dark wars might have been avoided? But enough of this. I did not call you here to bandy words of politics and philosophy. Tell me of your journey and what came before it upon the seat.
A moment,
said Lauren.
First, I saw someone in your courtyard. A young man not much older than I, with dark hair and a scar that split his chin. Who is he?
She was not displeased to see Cal frown in confusion, caught off guard by the question. Behind him, Annis's eyes narrowed with interest.
Ewell? What of him?
He looks familiar.
Cal snorted.
That is hardly possible. I have known him since he was a boy in Wayland, and he has been stationed here since he first joined the Mystics. He was not with me when we met in Brecker. If you have taken a fancy to him, that is not a matter I wish to give you any counsel upon whatsoever.
It was Lauren's turn to be caught off. What's up, Order 11? I don't think that's too very much like Vegeta. I could actually do a fairly decent Vegeta. What's one of his speeches from frickin'... Oh goddamn! I used to know so many Vegeta speeches.
Well, hello, Kakarot. Why am I not surprised to find you failed to take over even this dung heap of a planet? It's not his life he's fighting for. It's his Saiyan pride.
I guess it's adjacent to Vegeta. It's like it lives in the neighborhood of Vegeta.
It was Lauren's turn to be caught off guard, and she grew even angrier as she blushed anew.
I told you I only thought he had an odd look.
If she had thought for a moment to tell him of her dream, that impulse vanished.
Forget my soldiers and their odd looks and tell me of the attack upon the seat,
said Cal. She did, at least in brief. When Lauren spoke of some of the details of the battle, Annis's eyes went wide with shock and fear, especially when Lauren told how she had brought the city gate crashing down to crush Rogan. Then Cal had her tell him of everything that had come after, when those who lived upon the seat had fled to Selvin and then returned, and finally when Enelin had assigned her to Cal's service. She told him of the journey to Ammon as well, though he seemed to have little interest in that, and only studied the map that was laid out on his table, running his fingers through his beard in thought.
Very well, he muttered when she had finished. It is good you have come, even if it took you an age. I find myself with more duties than I can easily assume, especially after the High King named me Master of Spies. Ha! A useless title if ever there was one. She wishes for me to work for her in secret, yet because she names my position, I am known more widely than before, and secrecy comes scarce.
Wait, you're blowing my mind. What? What? Are you telling me the same guy who does Mojo Jojo is the guy on the phone in Scream? Oh my god! What the fuck? Oh, shit.
Lauren felt that they must be coming to the heart of the matter now. If you cannot act in secret, then let me act in your stead. What would you have me do? It was Annis who answered her, and once again Lauren was surprised as Cal let the girl speak without interruption. The answer to that is not entirely certain. Just now, the Nine Kingdoms are in a precarious position. The way that people perceive this war is even more important than the next battle. We have been trying to devise ways to sway the minds of the people, rather than outmaneuver our enemy on the field, for we are not generals. The High King's subjects, as well as her enemies, must see that she is resolved and capable, and that the kingdoms are unified behind her. None of the other kingdoms must be tempted to join with Dulmoon. That made Lauren balk. Would any of them do so? The treason of one kingdom is... Do so?
Them do so? Them do so? Them do so?
There you are, you son of a bitch. Die. I see you now, and I have a question for you. What's that? Die. That's not really a quick... Ah!
Would any of them do so? The treason of one kingdom is hard enough to believe. I cannot imagine that others would break their oaths. To Lauren's great annoyance, Cal and Annis looked at each other and rolled their eyes in unison. If that is true, why have the other kingdoms been so slow to answer Ennelin's call? Said Annis. Oh, Selvin is with her, for she hails from that land. Dorsey was quick to bend the knee. No doubt they feared her reprisal after the Battle of Welmont. Hedgeman, too, has pledged their strength, but that is an easy oath to keep, for they could not be farther away from the war itself. But where is Feldemar? Where are Wadeland and Idris and Wavemount? In days to come, their kings will no doubt claim that the High King's messengers were delayed by winter storms, or that their own messengers had been slow to return. Yet the truth is that they hesitate. And if even one of them joins Dulmoon, the hesitation of the rest will only increase, and then we will have a true war on our hands, one that cannot be quelled easily. All of this... One that cannot be quelled easily. Cannot be quelled easily. All of this was a bit beyond Lauren. In truth, she was shocked to hear Annis speaking of it so plainly, as though it were second nature. Her gaze lingered on the younger girl. Cal saw it, and a wry smile lifted one corner of his mouth.
She is impressive, is she not? At first, I will admit that I was dismayed to be saddled with the girl, but she has proven herself to have an uncanny mind for strategy.
Annis's dark cheeks turned darker still, and she lowered her gaze demurely. But Lauren saw the grin she could not banish.
Very well, said Lauren. I will leave such lofty matters to your hands, for the two of you seem more than capable of dealing with them. Yet my question remains, what shall I do?
If I have my way, you will be used to set an example, said Cal. Those who have acted against the High King must be brought to justice, and the more powerful the enemy we can lay low, the better. Do you know of any mighty enemy who might serve such a purpose? His eyes narrowed. Lauren felt a chill steal up her back, and her heart turned to ice.
You mean to send me after Rogan?
Yes, said Cal, nodding slowly. No one knows where he is, but we must find him. Tales have spread throughout Underrealm of this warrior, the man no one can kill, who leads the armies that march against the High King.
He is not the only one of his kind, said Lauren. We defeated another in the Great Rocks, one named Triskin. I would not doubt that there are more in the service of the
Hist! Cried Cal, slamming his hand down on the tabletop. He looked at the door, almost fearfully. Do not speak of such things where others may hear you. Lauren arched an eyebrow.
I thought you trusted your soldiers, Cal.
Cal scowled. I do, and I am also responsible for their safety. Some knowledge is dangerous, something I know Jordell taught you, or tried to, though it is clear you did not heed the lesson. Fuck you, Cal, you piece of shit. That hurt Lauren more than she wished to show. Like, he was supposed to be a piece of shit when I wrote him, and the more time goes on, the more I'm just like, God, you fucking suck, you asshole. That hurt Lauren more than she wished to show him, and so she lowered her head over the map. A thought came to her, and she pursed her lips.
It seems clear, then, what purpose you intend for me, yet you seem to speak of dark deeds. I told the High King that I would not kill in her name, and she vowed never to command me to do so.
Are you a fool, or have you not been listening? Said Cal. I do not wish for you to murder Rogan. That would accomplish little. Our display of the High King's power must be as public as possible, and well within the law. We do not mean to kill him in darkness and shadow. He must be captured, and the King's justice brought down upon him in such a way that word of it will spread as fast as his exploits in battle. That sounded far more palatable to Lauren. And in fact, now that she thought of it, it sounded just like the stories of Menet, the ancient thief of legend, from whom Lauren had drawn her first daydreams of becoming a thief. Menet had never killed, but when a noble or great merchant was unjust and cruel to those who served them, Menet would bring the king's justice down upon them without ever swinging the sword himself.
Well and good, said Lauren. Then my oath is intact. When do I begin?
You are too eager by half, Cal grumbled. And I have told you already that I do not know. If we knew where Rogan lurked, I would have acted already. I have learned what I needed from you. Go, find your friends and settle into your lodgings. I will send for you again when I know our next step. He bent over the map. Lauren turned to make for the door, but she paused upon seeing a pained look on Annis's face. Cal noticed the room's silence after a moment, and he looked up, frowning. When he saw Annis's anxious expression, he sighed. Very well, he growled. Spend this day in greeting and reunion if you wish, but I will expect you back on duty tomorrow. You shall have me, said Annis, barely restraining the glee in her voice. She ran towards Lauren, seizing her arm and drawing her out into the hallway.
Chapter 9 done. I gotta use the restroom real quick. BRB. Okay. Ugh. Chapter 10 incoming. Hello again, my love. What's up? I will when I'm done.
Okay, and then 2, when you're done,
Uh-huh.
on your way to work, do you mind calling Toyota and scheduling an oil change for the Toyota?
Sure.
That way you schedule it what's best for you.
Okay. Love you. Bye.
Chapter 10. Come, said Annis, eyes bright as she clutched Lauren's hand. I want to see the others. But Lauren pulled her to a stop around the corner where no one could overhear. In a moment. Annis, when did you become so... Annis, when did you become so wise in strategy that a Grand Chancellor of the Mystic Order would rely so strongly upon your counsel? Annis looked away bashfully.
Oh, that? That is no great matter. No great matter? He had you by his side the way the High King keeps the Lord Prince near her. The hallway grew quiet as Annis searched for words. Do you remember long ago when I told you of my mother and what she would invite me to do? Lauren's smile died as she nodded. Damaris of the family Yeren, Annis's mother, was a cruel and ruthless matron. To achieve her ends, she had killed and tortured many. And when Annis was still a very little girl, Damaris had invited her to join in the violence. It was why Annis had been so desperate to escape her family when she and Lauren first met. I remember, said Lauren quietly. Well, she did not only draw me into her darker activities, said Annis. I was there, too, for all the business one would expect in a merchant family, supply lines and the movement of men from kingdom to kingdom and things of that sort. Well, after I came here to Ammon, I was bored nearly to tears. I thought I would go mad for want of something to do. Then, mayhap a week after I arrived, Cal sent for me. He called me to his council chamber and asked me some questions of Yeren activities in Dorsey. I answered him, and more besides, for he was asking the wrong sorts of questions. Lauren frowned. What do you mean? Annis waved her hands as though she could pluck her explanation out of the air. It would have been better if you were there. He wanted to know why our holdings in Selvin were so much stronger than in Dorsey, since Dorsey borders more of the 9 kingdoms than Selvin. He did not understand that Selvin, though it may be farther from the other kingdoms as the bird flies, is yet more deeply connected because of its wealth and its relationship to the High King, with whom all curry favor, and that trade routes therefore are more easily— Quickly Lauren waved her hands. Never mind. I'm sorry I asked. Go on with your story. Well, I went on that way for some time, and when I paused to take a breath, I saw a strange look in Cal's eyes. I cannot think he has had many dealings with anyone from a merchant family before, for I did not tell him any great secrets of trade or commerce, but only the simplest truths we are taught as very young children. In any case, after that he began inviting me to many of his strategy sessions. I think you spoke in jest before, but I suppose I am a part of his council. A smile came to Lauren unbidden, and she clapped a firm hand on Annis's shoulder. Well, I for one am glad. You seemed at ease and confident. Happier, mayhap, than I have seen you since after Cabris. Annis giggled. I think I am. I have always thought of such things as a game, which my tutors did not favor, I can assure you, though they did not complain much, for I did well at my lessons regardless. And it has earned me some small amount of renown among the mystics who dwell here. Lauren's smile widened, but mention of the mystics made her think of the dark young man from the courtyard, who Cal had said was named Hewell. Her good mood evaporated. As for that, do you know many of the soldiers in Ammon? Have you met them or learned anything about them? Not very much, said Annis, shrugging. Why do you ask? Her dream flashed before her eyes, but how could she explain that? No, nothing. Pay me no mind. Annis's eyes narrowed, and the girl crossed her arms over her chest. You asked Cal something of this, did you not? What is your interest in this Hewell fellow? Lauren grimaced. She had forgotten how sharp and observant Annis could be, and always at the most inopportune times. It is no great matter, or I do not believe so. But if it should become important, I will tell you before anyone else, other than Chet, of course. Does that satisfy you? I suppose, said Annis, though you make it all sound very mysterious, and that is rarely a good sign with you. I could speak with Hewell if you wish, and try to learn what I— No, said Lauren, far more sharply than she had intended. She tried again, softening her tone. No, that is all right, but thank you. Annis's eyes shot wide, and for the first time the girl looked truly worried. Lauren, what is it? She whispered. Are we in any danger? Lauren thought of Chet's ruined throat and the feral look in Jem's eyes as he attacked her. But she forced a smile. No, of course not. We are in a stronghold of mystics, the greatest warriors in Underrealm. Where could we be safer? She could see that Annis was not entirely convinced, but she took the girl's arm and led her on down the hallway. Come, you have hardly had a chance to speak with Jem, and though you might not care overmuch, Chet, too, wishes to see you. Not as much as he wishes to see you, I am sure, said Annis with a sigh. Are the two of you... is it much the same as when I saw you last? A furious red sprang into Lauren's face. When last she had seen Annis, she and Chet had been chaste, but now... it is not... that is not quite the same. Annis must have taken her meaning, for her mouth formed a small circle. I did not mean to... that is, forgive me for prying. Lauren could not help a laugh at that. Still the modest merchant's daughter, I see. It is not prying that worries me, only I did not wish to embarrass you. Yes, well... Annis looked thoroughly miserable through her bashfulness. Might we speak of something else? Mayhap our friends can distract us, said Lauren. She took Annis's hand and led her running and laughing down the hallway. Annis pointed the way to the Stronghold's great dining hall, and there was Lauren's party, seated and eating a meal from the kitchens. Jem sprang to his feet at once and flung himself into Annis's arms, screaming with delight. Annis clutched at his shoulders and then pushed him away to look at him. And Lauren saw it. There in Annis's gaze was a pure and true love, even stronger, mayhap, than the way Lauren felt for Chet. Tears came freely to the girl's eyes as she smiled and clutched Jem to her again. But Jem only smiled and laughed, and Lauren saw no trace of the same feelings within him. Her high mood dampened for a moment. Chet gave Annis a warm enough greeting, and then came to Lauren. He took her hand in his and led her to the table. I will fetch you some food. What did Cal wish to discuss with you? Lauren's mind returned to the council room and the mission Cal had given her. Just as Chet had warned on the High King's seat, she would soon hunt for Rogan. Her mood darkened, and he saw it, but she only shook her head. There is time to discuss it later, she said. Let us wait until the happiness of this reunion has passed. He frowned, and she feared he might press her. But then Annis sat beside her, and Jem on her other side, both of them talking animatedly. And in the face of their joy, Chet closed his mouth again and went to fetch Lauren her dinner, while Lauren picked up a knife and began to pick at her nails with it.
All right. gonna blow my nose again. Be right back.
Chapter 11. Chapter 11. After they ate, Annis took Lauren and Chet and Jem to the stables, where they found Midnight waiting. Lauren gave a happy cry when she saw the mare, and scratched at her nose as Midnight whinnied in delight. But then the horse turned to Annis and pushed her muzzle against the girl's shoulder. Annis giggled and gave Lauren an embarrassed look. "We have become fast friends during our time here," she confessed. "I have visited her often and usually bring a treat from the kitchens, though I think that duty should now pass to you. Here." From a pocket in her cloak she drew an apple, and Lauren fed it to Midnight, who gave a sharp nicker of pleasure. They remained there for some time, and Lauren brushed Midnight's coat, though it was already clean and shining. Then Annis took them out into the courtyard and atop the wall, where they looked out over the surrounding lands. It had stopped raining. Night approached swiftly, and the last of the sun's pale light dimmed through the clouds. From their high perspective, Annis pointed out this or that part of the fortress, sharing tidbits she had learned from the mystics, who were growing more and more plentiful, the way she described it. "Ever since the attack on the seat, they have come in ever greater numbers," said Annis. "But they do nothing. There are no plans to engage in battle, at least not yet. They are only gathering their strength, and it is hard to escape reminders of the brewing war. I was only just starting to learn the names of those within the stronghold when all the newcomers started to arrive. Now I am nearly lost again." "Are you?"
I can tell you where to find yourself if you wish, said Naya. They all gave a little jump and turned. The mystic woman had appeared behind them as if by magic, and the others had come as well. Uzo, Shiun, Weeth, and Large Jormund. They each gave Lauren a nod. You did not hear us coming? Said Naya, giving Lauren a wide smile. You should keep a better lookout. I am in a stronghold full of allies, said Lauren, rolling her eyes. I thought I might let my guard down for half a moment. Naya smiled at her and then turned to Annis. A curious light shone in her eyes. Well, if it is not the Yeren girl. Annis frowned. I was not aware that we knew each other. But everyone in this stronghold knows you, said Naya, and her smile grew wider. Those who dwell here already speak of you as though you are their little sister. That mollified Annis considerably, and she held forth a hand. I am Annis of the family Yeren. Well met. Naya clasped her wrist. I already said I know who you are. I am Naya. These ones with me are Weeth, Uzo, Shiun, and Jormund. They greeted her one by one, and then stepped up to the ramparts beside Lauren and Chet, as Annis went on describing the lands that surrounded the stronghold. It seemed that Naya quickly grew bored, however, for she moved next to Lauren and leaned on the ramparts just to her right. Lauren saw that Chet took notice, and his mouth twisted in a frown. I want your counsel with the Grand Chancellor, said Naya. She spoke quietly so as not to interrupt Annis. Nothing very important came of it, said Lauren lightly. She tried not to pay attention to how close Naya was, so close that she could almost feel the woman's breath on her cheek. At least not yet, though it seems the next leg of my mission might begin sooner than I had expected. Naya straightened slightly and forgot to speak quietly. Naya straightened slightly. Naya straightened slightly and forgot to speak quietly. You are to ride forth? When? Annis's conversation halted, and the other mystics looked to Lauren. She shook her head quickly. That has not been decided. Cal does not yet know where to send me. As soon as that changes, I am sure I shall be summoned. The woman frowned. But he will not send you out alone, I hope. We were charged with your safety. To see me here, yes, said Lauren. But after that? Naya's jaw twitched as she searched for words. I would rest easier knowing you were in our hands than guarded by others in Ammon. Yes, and any excuse to march out the gate, muttered Uzo. Already the air here cloys my nostrils. They all went silent for a moment. Weeth and Naya looked to Uzo, and from their expressions Lauren felt that he had said something wrong, though she did not know what. But, too, she saw Annis look at Uzo, and Lauren saw something in the girl's eyes. Anxiousness, mayhap even fear, but certainly a sense of warning. Chet saw none of it, and it was his unknowing response that broke the moment's tension. I am not eager to leave. Here we are protected, and beyond Ammon's walls I think we will find only danger. Weeth turned to him and smiled, her troubled expression vanishing. But Annis and Naya still wore dark looks, and both of them looked far away as though lost in thought. I would welcome some danger, said Jormund to Chet. We have been idle since the attack on the seat. I feel that if I do not do something soon, I may go mad. I have not seen as much battle as you, certainly, but I do not wish for any more, said Chet. Mayhap you have no reason, snapped Uzo. I was in the palace when they came. I knew a lover there, a courtesan of the High King herself, and some others as well. Meaning yourself? Said Naya, smirking. Uzo's dark cheeks went darker. In any case, I saw him during the battle. I was in formation, and we could not break through the lines of the shades. I watched, helpless, as two of them dragged him from a side room. They cut him open there in the hall, and let his guts splash upon the marble floor. There was no reason for it. He had no weapon.
It was slaughter for the sake of slaughter. They were all silent for a moment after that. Lauren saw Jem looking up at Uzo, his jaw hanging slack. The boy's eyes shone wet, and not from the light drizzle that fell from the sky. One of Jormung's massive hands tightened into a fist. I was stationed on the north wall, but I went running to the eastern docks as soon as the horns sounded. I saw the Domish fleet land, and the gate had already been drawn up against them. Some of the folk from the city had been trapped outside, but rather than flee north or south, they only pounded on the gate. We tried to get it open and let them in, but before we could, the Domish soldiers set upon them, piercing them with spears so that their bodies were pinned to the wall.
We all saw dark things that day,
said Weath quietly.
We all have reason to hate the Shades.
Lauren thought of the part she had played in the Battle of the Palace and found herself nodding in agreement. But then she thought of Zane, and that in turn made her think of Jordell.
Vengeance,
she said, but her voice broke. She cleared her throat and tried again, quietly.
Vengeance is a poor reason to ride into battle. Let us not make war for hatred. We should seek justice instead. A wise man and a mystic taught me that.
Weath and Jormund bowed their heads. Lauren knew that they had been Cal's soldiers for some time and had known Jordell, at least in passing. But Naya gave Lauren a wry look.
Why should it matter if justice or vengeance swings the sword? A head will... Why should it matter if justice or vengeance swings the sword? A head will roll free regardless. I have fought before, and I have learned this. Give yourself whatever reason you need to fight. To win. Then you may dream up whatever reason to fight. But when you go to battle, fight to win. Then you may dream up whatever reason you wish. You cannot do that if you are dead.
Lauren's ears burned.
I only mean that having a clear mind and a clear purpose may...
Naya shook her head.
I know what you meant.
Somehow the reassurance left Lauren feeling even more embarrassed. She knew that she had been naive when she left the Birchwood and had thought that everyone she met could be held to her own rules of right and wrong. But that had ended in disaster more than once, and no more so than when Jordell had fallen in the Great Rocks. She could keep her own vow, yes, and never take a life, but she knew that if she led these mystics upon their mission and did not look upon the world with both eyes open, it would lead only to tragedy and death.
The Nightblade must have honor, she told herself, but the Nightblade must also be wise, for who would call me honorable if I let others die?
Her gaze drifted, and she looked down from the wall into the courtyard. The door to the stronghold opened, and a mystic stepped out. The daylight was almost gone, but she recognized him from the scar that split his chin. Huel. Her brows drew together.
What?
Whispered Chet, catching the look on her face.
What is wrong?
Lauren did not answer him, but turned to the rest of them.
I am weary from the road and desire rest,
she said.
I bid all of you a good night. I will show you to your quarters,
said Annis brightly.
Follow me.
She led them down into the courtyard. The mystics stayed atop the wall, with Naya giving Lauren a final nod, along with a secretive smile that made Lauren's heart flutter. As Annis scampered down the steps, Lauren lagged behind to speak with Chet.
You remember my dream upon the sea,
she said.
I do,
said Chet, frowning.
I saw a man in my dream, a man dressed in the clothes of a shade. And then, when we arrived at Ammon today, I saw him again. He was in Cal's guard. He had a scar on his chin.
Chet's eyes widened.
I remember the one. You are certain? He was in your dream? I am. It was not a likeness. It was the same man. What?
Chet stopped and looked about, as though he expected to find eavesdroppers. What do you suppose it means? I do not know, said Lauren. You do not think I am going mad? Why should I think that? Said Chet, shrugging. I often dream of those I have met in the waking world, and sometimes I see people in my dreams who do not exist at all. But never have I seen someone in my sleep only for them to appear in true life. And besides, you have spoken with elves. The memory made Lauren shudder. That was my thought as well. They are fey, and I never had such dreams before I met them. But even if this is some work of theirs, what does it mean? What should we do? Who can we trust here? Said Chet. Annis and Jem, of course, though I do not know if they will be of much help. What about Cal? Could you not tell him what you saw? I do not think he would place much stock in a dream, said Lauren. Her thoughts drifted to Naya, and she remembered how the woman often looked at her. We might tell the mystics who came with us. No, said Chad at once. We barely know that Naya woman, for we scarcely met her a week ago. And though we have known some of the others a while longer, still we have not spent much time with them. I would hardly call them friends. Yet they are capable warriors, and Naya seems wise besides, said Lauren. She is a captain, as Jordell was. We need someone who knows something of the mystics. If you must speak to one of them, speak to Weeth, or Shiun, or Jormund, or Uzo, said Chet, but not Naya. Lauren gave him a look, as though she thought she heard what he was unwilling to say. Almost she took him to task for it, but now hardly seemed the time. Very well, she said. Let us mention it first to Annis, only I do not think it would be wise to tell her everything at once. Chet gave a sigh of relief. I agree. They increased their pace to catch up with the children again. Soon they reached their quarters, and Annis stopped them before a wooden door. Lauren gave him a look, as though she thought she heard him a look. Lauren gave him a look. She heard what he was Lauren gave him a look. She heard what he was unwilling to say. Lauren gave him a look. She heard what he was unwilling to say. Almost she took him to task for it, but now hardly seemed the time. Very well, she said. Let us mention it first to Annis, only I do not think it would be wise to tell her everything at once. Chet gave a sigh of relief. I agree. They increased their pace to catch up with the children again. Soon they reached their quarters, and Annis stopped them before a wooden door. I am just across the hall, in a room where some mystics stay as well, she said. Jem is in the next room over. Lauren and Chet, your room is your own. Thank you, Annis, said Lauren. She glanced up and down the hallway. No one else was in sight. Would you mind stepping within for a moment, both of you? There was one more matter I wished to discuss. Annis and Jem frowned at each other, but they followed Lauren into her room. It was a meager place with only a bed, a single chest, and a bureau against the wall. There were neither chairs nor rugs nor drapes, as they had had upon the seat, nor even a window, and only a small hole near the ceiling so that burning a lantern did not make the room too stuffy. Lauren closed the door behind the children and stood before them, fidgeting with her hands. What is it, Lauren? Said Annis. Clearly something troubles you greatly. I must ask you to trust me, Lauren blurted out. But I cannot tell you exactly why. The girl's nostrils flared. Is this about Huel? What is the matter with you? Or with him? Spit it out.
Hey, Vale, good morning. Audio proofing goes pretty good, although I've got a little bit of a sniffly cold thing going on, which is very fucking annoying.
She put her hands to her hips, and for a moment looked just like her mother as she scowled. Yes, it is Hewell, said Lauren. Is there anything at all, that you know about him? The smallest detail might help. Annis threw up her hands. I have told you I know almost nothing. I believe he is a messenger, but I am not even certain of that. Lauren and Chet shared a look. A messenger? Who better to act as a spy for the enemy? Jem was frowning at the both of them now. What under the sky has you so worried? He said. I have not seen you this anxious since just before the attack upon the seat. There is nothing for it, she said quietly to Chet. I know, he said. Lauren took a deep breath and spoke in a whisper. I think he may be a shade. The room went very still. Annis and Jem both froze, as though they were afraid a movement might reveal them to some unseen enemy. At last, Annis licked her lips. Why? She said. I cannot explain that, said Lauren. But for my peace of mind, if nothing else, we must look into it. How? Said Jem. I do not think I could walk up to him in the dining hall and ask, Say, do you have another change of clothes that are blue and gray? Have you lost a friend named Triskin recently? What do you mean to do? I do not know exactly, said Lauren. But we can start with his personal effects. The chances are small that we will find anything to prove what I suspect, but we have to try. Annis shivered. Very well. We can do it tomorrow. I will find out where his quarters are. Thank you, said Lauren. Now, go to bed, both of you, and ready yourselves. Let us all hope that I am wrong.
Oh. In a hotel while they fix some things at the house, and I've been using breakfast to read Seven-Figure Fiction, How to Use Universal Fantasy to Sell Your Books to Anyone by Theodora Taylor, and it's romance-centric but interesting so far. Interesting! Seven-Figure Fiction. That's quite a mixed metaphor. I just ordered myself a copy. I'll give that a read. I've been looking for more writing-centric nonfiction recently. Okay. I gotta go. We're like over a quarter of the way there as of today, so that's good. Which means we're on track for our goal. If all goes well, this should only take... If all goes according to current speeds, we should be done with this 3 hours under target, which would be fantastic. Heroine's Journey by Gail Carriger. By Gail Carriger. I shall put this on my list. My books list. All right, who are we rating today? Let us raid Fariha. Silence. She is an excellent streamer who we like very much. If the hero's journey feels like it's a little bit BS at times, and you've enjoyed basically any anime and you have friends, it's a good counterpoint. Excellent. All right, well, say hi to Fariha for me. She's an awesome LGBT variety streamer. Plays games and sometimes just does chats. Right now, she's playing Overwatch, I suppose. Occasionally, I've seen her do music. But yeah, Overwatch, which is a game that I love very dearly, especially for never having played it before. All right, y'all. Thanks for coming and hanging out. Vale, Erica, Lady Temeraire, Cameron, Order 11. Y'all are awesome. We will continue on the audiobook QC tomorrow, and I will see you then. Bye.
Start
Oh my gosh! VlogaNovel! Thank you so much for the raid! Hello! Thank you, thank you, thank you! How was your stream today? How's it going? Oh my god. Do headshots not one-shot Cassidy anymore? What the heck? That's so weird. Can't remember.